This 6-year-old beggar girl knocks on a mansion door asking for food, but the one who answers is a millionaire grieving the loss of his daughter. What happens next will make you cry. Comment what you think will happen. Your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. Your help is very important. The rain relentlessly lashed the cobblestone streets of Charleston, South Carolina, while thunder echoed between the historic townhouses on that July night. Lily, a girl of only 6 years old, shivered with cold in her soaked and tattered clothes, her small bare feet bruised from the long walk. Her big brown eyes, which held a sadness greater than her age, fixed on the imposing mansion in front of her, the last house on the richest street in town, Rainbow Row. The little girl's stomach ached. It had been 3 days since she had eaten anything other than a piece of stale bread that a lady had given her. Her grandmother, Clara, 72, was so sick that she could barely get up from the cardboard where they slept under the highway overpass. The old woman's constant cough and difficult breathing were like stabs to little Lily's heart. With trembling hands, she reached for the heavy brass knocker and rapped on the door. The sound echoed through the silent mansion interior. Seconds turned into endless minutes until heavy footsteps approached. The door opened, revealing Richard Sterling, 58, owner of the largest mining corporation in the region. His red eyes and the strong smell of liquor betrayed yet another night, drowning his sorrows in expensive scotch. Since the accident that took his daughter Petra 6 months ago, he had become a shadow of the powerful businessman he used to be. "Please, mister." "Just a piece of bread," Lily whispered, her small voice almost swallowed by the sound of the storm. Something in the girl's gaze made Richard freeze. There was a familiar strength in those eyes, something that painfully reminded him of Petra. Against all his better judgment, he opened the door wider. "Come in," he said dryly, surprising himself with the invitation. The girl hesitated for a moment before stepping into the luxurious hall, leaving small puddles of water on the Italian marble floor. The mansion was a monument to success and loneliness, expensive furniture covered in a thin layer of dust, walls decorated with valuable paintings that no one admired anymore. "My grandma's very sick," Lily said, wringing the soaked hem of her blouse. "She won't stop coughing and she's burning up with fever. I can't help." The girl's words were interrupted by a fit of shivers. Richard, even in his inebriated state, realized she was suffering from hypothermia. "Wait here," he ordered, climbing the stairs with unsteady steps. He returned minutes later with a towel and an old blanket. As he watched the girl dry herself, a war raged within him. The rational part said to send the child away with some food. There were already too many problems in his life to get involved with a street urchin, but something stronger, maybe the scotch, maybe the memory of Petra, made him act differently. "Where's your grandma now?" "Under the I-26 overpass," Lily replied, now a little warmer. "She's very bad, mister. I'm scared." Richard ran a hand over his tired face. He knew that the only public hospital in the city was always crowded, but he also knew that a call from him would open doors immediately. "I'll have your grandma picked up and taken to the hospital," he said finally. "You can stay in the maids' quarters for a few days until she gets better." Lily's eyes filled with tears. "You'd do that?" Before he could answer, a cutting voice interrupted the moment. "Richard, have you completely lost your mind?" Eleanor, his sister-in-law, stood at the top of the stairs, her face a mask of disapproval. At 45, she was a woman who exuded elegance and coldness in equal measure. "Stay out of it, Eleanor," Richard replied, his voice carrying a clear warning. "You're drunk and bringing a beggar into the house. What will people think? What would Petra—" "Don't you dare speak of her!" Richard thundered, his voice echoing through the mansion. Lily shrank back, frightened by the outburst. Eleanor descended the stairs slowly, her heels marking each step like a hammer. Very well, do as you please, but don't say I didn't warn you when this charity turns into a problem. As Eleanor left, Richard made a few calls. In less than an hour, an ambulance had picked up Clara and taken her to the hospital. The old woman had severe pneumonia, requiring intensive care. That night, Lily slept for the first time in a real bed in the small maid's quarters. But her sleep was restless, worried about her grandmother and frightened by the strange environment. In the master bedroom, Richard downed another glass of scotch, watching the storm through the window. Why had he helped that girl? What was it about her that touched him so deeply? But while these thoughts tormented him, downstairs, Eleanor was making suspicious calls, her voice a conspiratorial whisper in the night. I need you to find out everything about this girl and her grandmother. Yes, any information that can get rid of them. Price is no object. What none of them knew was that Clara, in her hospital bed, was delirious with high fever, muttering words that made the nurses frown. The plantation, the accident, Jordan. They need to know. They need to know. In the mansion, Lily got up in the middle of the night and, driven by childish curiosity, began to explore the place silently. Her steps led her to a half-open door that revealed a room full of dusty boxes. In the dark, her fingers found an old photograph that made her heart stop. There, smiling in black and white, was a woman identical to her mother. Lily held the photograph with trembling hands when a creak on the floor made her turn abruptly. Richard was standing in the doorway of the attic, his face a mask of fury that made her recoil instinctively. What are you doing here? His voice came out as a roar as he crossed the room in long strides. He snatched the photo from Lily's small hands so forcefully that it hurt her fingers. Never go in this place again, never! The girl ran crying to the maid's quarters, shrinking under the covers. Her heart was pounding in her chest, not from the scolding, but from what she had seen. How could there be a photo of someone who looked so much like her mother Jordan in that house? The next morning, coffee was served in a heavy silence. Lily barely touched the food, despite it being the first full meal she had seen in weeks. Her hands still hurt from the night before. I'm going to visit your grandma at the hospital, Richard said dryly, without looking at the girl. Stay in the room and don't leave. At the hospital, Clara alternated between moments of lucidity and feverish delirium. The pneumonia had worsened, and the doctors were worried about her recovery. When Richard entered the room, she opened her clouded eyes. You... the old woman murmured, trying to sit up in bed. You're just like your father. Do you know me? Richard asked, frowning. Before Clara could answer, a nurse entered in a hurry. Mr. Sterling, I need you to leave. The patient needs further tests. On the way out of the hospital, Richard met Robert, his lawyer and best friend of 30 years. Tall and thin, with graying hair at the temples, Robert was known for his unwavering integrity. What's gotten into you? Robert asked, worried. Eleanor called me hysterical, saying you've gone mad and brought beggars into the house. It's just a girl and her sick grandmother, Richard replied, running a hand over his tired face. A few days until the old woman recovers, nothing more. And since when do you care? Robert's question went unanswered. In the mansion, Lily disobeyed Richard's order. Her curiosity was stronger than her fear. Taking advantage of everyone's absence, she returned to the attic. Among the dusty boxes, she found a photo album. Her heart almost stopped when she saw more photos of the woman identical to her mother, this time alongside an authoritarian man wearing a sterling mining badge. What do you think you're doing? Eleanor's voice made her drop the album. Richard's sister-in-law was standing at the door, her eyes flashing with anger. I was just looking for something to steal. Is that what your grandmother taught you? Eleanor advanced menacingly. People like you never change. I'm calling the police right now. No, please, Lily pleaded, tears streaming down her face. I just wanted to understand. The woman in the photo looks just like my mom. Something changed in Eleanor's face, a flash of recognition, followed by pure panic. Get out of here, now! Lily ran to her room, her heart pounding. Hours later, she heard raised voices downstairs. You can't throw them out. It was Robert's voice. The girl has nowhere to go, and the grandmother is in the hospital. I can and I will, Eleanor replied. That brat is snooping where she shouldn't. She's going to destroy everything we've built. What are you talking about? Richard asked. She found the old photos from the plantation, Eleanor said, lowering her voice. The photos from before the accident. The silence that followed was deafening. At the hospital, Clara worsened. The fever wouldn't break, and in her delirium, she muttered increasingly disturbing words. The accident, my Jordan, they hurt her, made her leave. My girl! The nurse who was taking care of her, Mrs. Johnson, a black woman with white hair and a huge heart, began to write down the disconnected words. Something in that story didn't make sense. Meanwhile, the investigator hired by Eleanor, a man named Hank, was scouring old city records. On his desk, a growing pile of documents revealed a dark story involving the Sterling family and a young maid named Jordan. Back at the mansion, Lily was crying softly in her room when she heard a soft melody. She followed the sound to a room she had never noticed before. It was a closed room, the windows covered by heavy curtains. In the center, covered by a white sheet, was a grand piano. Without thinking, Lily approached and touched a key. The crystalline sound echoed through the empty room. Don't touch that! Richard was at the door, more drunk than usual, but something in his face was different. It wasn't anger, it was pure pain. It was hers. It was Petra's. He staggered to an armchair and collapsed, tears streaming down his aging face. She played like an angel, he murmured, more to himself than to Lily. She had a natural gift. Like you seem to have too. The girl approached cautiously. Can I learn? The question caught Richard by surprise. For a moment, he saw his Petra there, the same age, asking the same question. The pain and longing suffocated him. Get out, he whispered. Get out. Of here. That night, as Lily cried, hugging her pillow, Eleanor made an important call. Hank, I need you to speed up the investigation. Something tells me this girl. We need to act before it's too late. The investigator looked at the documents on his desk, certificates, hospital records, old news reports. Mrs. Sterling, I think I've discovered something. Something big. You won't believe who this girl is. At the hospital, Clara had a sudden downturn. Between gasps of pain, she managed to whisper to Mrs. Johnson, My granddaughter, I need to tell. The accident on the plantation. Jordan, she never knew the truth. But before she could complete the sentence, the machines began to beep frantically. The medical team rushed into the room, leaving Mrs. Johnson in the hallway, clutching to her chest a notebook full of notes on Clara's delusions. And in the mansion, Lily, unable to sleep, silently returned to the piano room. Her small fingers touched the keys with a naturalness that frightened her. From somewhere deep in her memory, a melody began to emerge, the same one that her mother used to sing to her to sleep years ago. The music flowed through the silent house, waking Richard from his alcoholic stupor. Paralyzed in his bed, he listened in disbelief. It was the same melody that his Petra played every morning, the same one that his wife had composed decades ago, a song that only his family knew. How could that girl know? Richard went down the stairs with faltering steps, following the melody that seemed to float through the empty hallways of the mansion. His heart hammered in his chest. That song, composed by his late wife Laura, was like a ghost from the past that haunted him. He found Lily sitting at the piano, her small fingers dancing on the keys with an impossible intimacy. The girl was in a trance, playing with her eyes closed, as if the music flowed directly from her.
Soul.
Where did you learn that? Richard asked, his voice thick with emotion. Lily stopped playing, startled. My mom sang it to me to sleep, she replied in a thin voice. She said it was a special song, that her mother sang it to her. The world seemed to spin beneath Richard's feet. How could that song, kept as a private treasure of his family, have reached the lips of Lily's mother? Before he could ask more questions, the phone rang shrilly in the next room. It was from the hospital. Clara had suffered cardiac arrest and was in critical condition. I need to go to the hospital, Richard said, running a hand through his graying hair. You can play later. At the hospital, the scene was chaotic. A strong storm had caused problems with the power grid, and the emergency generator was working precariously. In the dimly lit hallways, doctors and nurses ran back and forth. Mrs. Johnson intercepted Richard before he reached Clara's room. Mr. Sterling, I need to show you something, the nurse said, pulling him to a discreet corner. In her hands, a battered notebook contained notes from Clara's delusions. She talks a lot about an accident on the Sterling plantation, Mrs. Johnson explained. About your daughter Jordan, about injustices and secrets. Richard's face paled as he read the notes. Fragments of memory began to fit together like pieces of a macabre puzzle. At that moment, Robert arrived breathless. Richard, we have a problem. Eleanor hired a private investigator, and he's discovered things about the past, about your family. But they were interrupted by a deafening crash. The rain had turned into a downpour, and part of the roof of the old hospital began to give way. Immediate evacuation, someone shouted. The building is compromised. Amidst the chaos of the evacuation, with patients being transferred in a hurry, Clara disappeared. No one could say whether she had been taken to another hospital or had gotten lost in the confusion. At the mansion, Eleanor took advantage of Richard's absence to confront Lily. She found the girl still in the piano room, gently plucking at the keys. You're just like your mother, Eleanor said with contempt, going where you shouldn't, messing with what isn't yours. Did you know my mom? Lily asked, her eyes shining with hope. Eleanor's face twisted into a mask of hatred. Your mother was a gold digger who tried to destroy the Sterling family, and now you're here doing the same thing. At that moment, Hank, the investigator, entered the room unannounced. Mrs. Sterling, I found the documents that prove everything. The accident on the plantation, the lawsuit that was hushed up, the money paid to silence. Lily, forgotten in a corner, listened to everything with her heart pounding. What accident was that? What had happened to her mother? Great, Eleanor said, a cruel smile forming on her lips. Now we can get rid of this girl once and for all. It's not that simple, Hank interjected. There's more. Something you need to see in private. As they left the room, Lily ran to her room and began to gather her few belongings. She needed to find her grandmother, discover the truth, escape from that house where secrets seemed to whisper from every corner. But as she tried to leave through the back door, she found Robert. The lawyer seemed worried and at the same time determined. Come with me, he said gently. I know a place where you'll be safe until we discover the whole truth. In his home office, Robert kept an old folder with documents from the Sterling family. Among them, yellowed newspaper clippings told the story of a serious accident on the family's plantation in 1982. Your mother worked there, Robert explained, showing a photo where a young Jordan smiled alongside other employees. There was an accident, something the Sterling family tried to hide. Meanwhile, in the partially evacuated hospital, Richard found Clara's room empty. On the unmade bed, a notebook had fallen during the confusion, an old diary that the old woman kept hidden. With trembling hands, Richard began to read. My dear Jordan suffered so much. The accident that left her with permanent damage was only the beginning. Augustus Sterling, Richard's father threatened us, kicked us out. Jordan was never the same. And now my little Lily carries a gift that shouldn't be possible. The same musical gift as Laura Sterling. The diary fell from Richard's hands. Laura, his wife, had been an extraordinary pianist before she passed. Petra had inherited her talent, and now Lily demonstrated the same supernatural ability. The storm continued to lash Charleston, turning the cobblestone streets into raging rivers. Somewhere in the city, Clara wandered confused, her memories scrambled by fever and trauma. In the mansion, Eleanor read the documents brought by Hank. With growing horror, "No, it can't be. This would destroy everything." And at Robert's house, Lily huddled on an old sofa, hugging a photograph found among the documents, an image showing her mother Jordan next to Laura Sterling, both smiling in front of a piano, as if they shared a secret that time had tried to bury. The city of Charleston awoke devastated after the storm. The public hospital was partially closed. Dozens of families had lost their homes, and the wreckage in the streets told the story of a night of destruction. At Robert's house, Lily couldn't sleep. She had spent the entire night looking at the photograph of her mother with Laura Sterling, trying to understand how their lives were connected. For the first time, she noticed a detail in the image. In the corner of the piano, there was a handwritten score, the same melody that her mother sang to her to sleep. "You're up early," Robert said, entering the room with a cup of coffee. His tired eyes showed that he hadn't slept either. "There's something I need to tell you." The lawyer sat down heavily in his favorite armchair and took some papers, yellowed with time, from a folder. "Your mother, Jordan, wasn't just a maid on the Sterling plantation," he began, his voice laden with regret. "She was a piano student of Laura Sterling, Richard's wife. Laura saw a special talent in Jordan, something rare like what you demonstrated yesterday." Lily hugged her knees, feeling her heart tighten. Her mother never talked about the past, and now she was beginning to understand why. "The accident happened on an afternoon in September 1982, Robert continued. "Augustus Sterling, Richard's father, was furious because Laura gave piano lessons to the employees. He thought it made them forget their place." At that moment, they were interrupted by urgent knocks on the door. It was Mrs. Johnson, the nurse, her uniform still dirty from the confusion of the night before. "Mr. Robert, thank God I found you," she exclaimed, entering in a hurry. "Clara, she left this with me before the evacuation." The nurse handed over a crumpled envelope. Inside, there was a letter written in a trembling hand. "My dear Lily, if you're reading this, it's because I couldn't be strong enough to tell you personally. The accident on the Sterling plantation wasn't an accident. Your mother was taking piano lessons with Laura, hidden from Augustus. When he found out, he was distraught. He ordered the piano in the back room where they practiced to be destroyed. But Jordan was in there. The piano fell, trapping her legs." The letter trembled in Lily's hands. Tears blurred her vision as she continued reading. "Laura tried to help, wanted to pay for the treatments, but Augustus forbade it. He threatened to sue us if we said anything. Jordan could never play the piano again. The sequelae were too severe. But every night she sang to you the song that Laura composed. At the Sterling mansion, Richard found Eleanor in his office, surrounded by documents." "What did you find?" he asked, noting his sister-in-law's distraught face. "Laura, she left a letter before she passed," Eleanor replied, her voice trembling. "She found out what your father did to Jordan. She was gathering evidence. She was going to report everything." "What are you talking about?" "The car accident that took Laura." "It wasn't an accident," Eleanor whispered. "Your father, he..." Before she could continue, they were interrupted by Hank, who entered without knocking. "Mrs. Sterling, I found Clara," the investigator announced. "She's in a shelter in Somerville, a neighboring town. But there's something strange. She doesn't remember anything. The blow during the evacuation caused amnesia. Richard felt the world spin. So many secrets, so many lies. His own father, whom he had always admired, had destroyed so many lives. On an impulse, he grabbed his car keys and headed towards Somerville. He needed to find Clara. He needed to know the whole truth. But Eleanor was faster. As soon as Richard left, she called her contacts. "Don't let him get to her," she ordered. "Do whatever it takes, but Clara can't recover her memory. If she remembers, if she tells, everything we've built will crumble." At Robert's house, Lily continued reading her grandmother's letter. Laura and Jordan had an even bigger secret. In the months they practiced piano together, they became more than teacher and student. Laura saw in Jordan the daughter she could never have naturally. She even talked to her husband, Richard, about helping her study music in the capital. "But then," Lily murmured, her hands shaking, "why doesn't Mr. Sterling know any of this?" "Because Augustus Sterling manipulated everything," Robert explained. "He made Richard believe that Jordan had tried to extort money from the family. Laura tried to tell the truth, but—" A thunderclap interrupted the conversation. Another storm was approaching Charleston. At the shelter in Somerville, Clara was sitting in a wheelchair, looking out the window. Her empty eyes recognized nothing and no one. But when a staff member turned on the radio and classical music began to play, something shone in her gaze. "The piano," she murmured. "The piano in the back room." At that moment, Richard arrived at the shelter, soaked by the rain that was beginning to fall. Seeing Clara, his heart stopped. The old woman, even weakened, was the living image of someone from his past, someone he couldn't quite remember who. "Mrs. Clara," he called softly. The old woman turned slowly. For an instant, her eyes seemed to recognize him. "You're just like your father," she said, her voice distant. "But you have her eyes." Laura's eyes. And then, like lightning cutting through the dark sky, Clara's memory began to return. Tears streamed down her wrinkled face as the memories hit her like waves. "The music," she whispered. "Laura composed it for Jordan, for the daughter. She never—" But before she could complete the sentence, a nurse entered the room in a hurry. "So you need to leave now. The patient needs to rest." Outside the shelter in the pouring rain, Richard realized he was crying. Clara's words, Laura's music, Lily's inexplicable talent, everything was beginning to make terrible sense. The rain relentlessly lashed the asphalt as Richard returned to the mansion, soaked and distraught. Clara's words echoed in his mind, mixing with fragments of memories long buried. In the music room, he sat down at Petra's piano and, for the first time in months, lifted the lid. Among the old sheet music, he found a yellowed envelope that he had never noticed before. His heart almost stopped when he recognized Laura's delicate handwriting. The letter was dated the day before the accident that took her. "My beloved Richard, when you find this letter, I may no longer be here. Your father found out everything about Jordan, about the piano lessons, about our plans. He threatened me, said he would destroy her life if I didn't stay away. But I can no longer live with this weight. Jordan isn't just my student. During these months giving her lessons, I discovered something that would change our lives forever. She has the same rare gift that I have, the ability to play a song just by hearing it once. It's a talent that runs in my family for generations. I beg your forgiveness for not having told you before, but I was afraid of your father's reaction. Jordan became the daughter I could never give you. I was preparing her to study at the conservatory. I wanted to give her the opportunities that your father denied the employees." The letter slipped from Richard's trembling hands. He remembered how Laura always wanted to have children but couldn't, how she spent hours at the piano, composing sad songs that spoke of unrealized dreams. In Somerville, at the shelter where Clara was staying, the old woman's memory was returning in painful flashbacks. Mrs. Johnson, who had followed Richard there, noted every word. Laura gave hidden lessons to Jordan in the back room. My girl had a special gift, something I didn't even understand properly. Laura said it was like looking in a mirror, that Jordan played exactly like her. At Robert's house, Lily couldn't sleep. Sitting at the small upright piano in the room, her fingers glided over the keys, drawing out melodies she had never learned. It was as if the music lived inside her, waiting to be released. "It's impressive," Robert said, watching her from the door. "You play exactly like Laura Sterling." The lawyer approached with an old box in his arms. "I found this in the office. Archives. They're old recordings from when Laura gave concerts in the city." He put a cassette tape on to play. The music that filled the room made Lily freeze. It was the same melody that her mother sang, the same one she had just played instinctively. At that moment, the phone rang. It was Mrs. Johnson, her voice urgent. "Mr. Robert, Clara has completely recovered her memory. She wants to talk to her granddaughter, but there's something wrong. Eleanor is here trying to take her to another place." At the shelter, Eleanor faced resistance from the staff. "I'm family. I have every right to transfer this patient to a private clinic." But Clara, now lucid, grabbed the nurse's arm. "Don't let her. She wants to silence me. The truth about Laura and Jordan needs to be revealed." Richard drove along the rain-soaked road towards Somerville when his cell phone rang. It was Hank. "Mr. Sterling, I discovered something in the old mining company archives. On the day of Laura's accident, your father made a call to the mechanic shop. The brakes on the car." The line went dead. The storm was getting worse, turning the road into a muddy river. In the empty mansion, a shadow moved through the attic. Eleanor frantically rummaged through the old boxes. "It has to be here. The certificate. The evidence." Her fingers found a sealed envelope. Inside, documents that made her blood run cold. Adoption agreement. Jordan Maria da Silva, adoptive parents, Laura and Gabriel Sterling. Status, process interrupted. The date was 1 week before Laura's accident. At Robert's house, Lily continued, playing the piano, silent tears streaming down her face. The music that flowed from her fingers was like a lament, carrying decades of pain and secrets. Robert watched the girl, his mind piecing together the puzzle. Laura couldn't have children. She gave lessons to Jordan. The same rare musical gift, the interrupted adoption process. The lawyer picked up the phone, his hands shaking. "Richard, you need to come back now. I've discovered something. Something about Laura and Jordan. About the real reason for the accident." But it was too late. On the road to Somerville, Richard's car skidded in the mud, spinning out of control towards the embankment. At the shelter, Clara rose from her wheelchair with a strength that no one expected. Enough with the lies. Laura planned to adopt Jordan. She discovered that my girl was the daughter of her sister, who was abandoned in an orphanage. They had the same blood, the same gift. Eleanor recoiled, horrified. Her entire plan to keep the secrets buried was crumbling. "That's why Lily plays like Laura," Clara continued, her voice getting stronger. "That's why she knows the songs without ever having learned them. The gift passes from mother to daughter, and Laura was..." A deafening thunderclap swallowed her last words. The storm was now a deluge, as if the very sky wept for so many years of secrets and pain. Somewhere between Charleston and Somerville, a car lay teetering on the edge of a precipice, its wheels spinning slowly in the mud. Inside, Richard Sterling clutched the envelope with Laura's letter tightly as a devastating truth finally came to light. The accident that took Laura from him had not been an accident, and the musical gift he now saw in Lily was living proof of a story that his father had tried to erase, a story of love, music, and blood ties that not even time could silence. The sun rose over Charleston, its first golden rays piercing through the clouds of the storm that was finally dissipating. On the side of the road to Somerville, Robert found Richard's car. The businessman was injured but conscious, clinging to Laura's letter as if his life depended on those words. "We need to get to the shelter," Richard murmured, refusing to go to the hospital. "Clara, she knows the whole truth." At the shelter, the tension was palpable. Mrs. Johnson stood firm at the door of Clara's room, preventing Eleanor from entering, who had spent the night trying to convince the staff to transfer the old woman. Lily arrived with Robert and Richard, her small heart pounding as she saw her grandmother. Clara, now completely lucid, opened her arms to her granddaughter. "My little one," the old woman whispered, tears streaming down her wrinkled face. "The time has come for you to know the whole truth." The room fell into absolute silence as Clara began her story. Laura Sterling was not just Richard's wife. She had a younger sister, Mary Claire, who was abandoned as a baby in an orphanage. Laura's parents, ashamed by the pregnancy out of wedlock, hid the existence of their second daughter. Mary Claire grew up without knowing her origins, was adopted by a simple family, and later became Jordan's mother. Richard sat down heavily, his head spinning with the revelation. Laura never knew she had a sister, but she always felt that something was missing in her life. When Laura started giving piano lessons to Jordan, Clara continued, she noticed something extraordinary. It wasn't just the talent. It was as if she were watching herself play. The same rare gift, the same way of feeling the music. Laura began to investigate, Robert interrupted, holding up documents found in the office. She discovered the truth about her sister, about Jordan being her niece, the adoption process we found. She wanted to do everything right. She wanted to raise Jordan as her daughter, to give her every opportunity. "But Augustus Sterling found out," said Clara, her voice trembling with anger. "He couldn't allow an employee to be revealed as part of the family. The scandal would destroy his reputation in town. It was then that he—" Richard couldn't complete the sentence. The pain of the revelation was unbearable. "Yes," Clara confirmed. "He had Laura's car sabotaged. She was on her way to the registry office. She was going to officially register Jordan's adoption process. Afterwards, he forged documents, making it appear that Jordan was trying to extort money from the family." Eleanor, cornered by the truth, tried to flee the room, but Robert stopped her. "You knew everything," he accused. "That's why you fought. So hard to keep Lily away. She's living proof of the truth that you and Augustus tried to bury." "Jordan was never the same after the accident with the piano," Clara continued. "The physical sequelae prevented her from playing, but every night she sang to Lily the song that Laura composed. It was her way of keeping alive the connection. With the aunt she never got to truly know." Lily, who had listened to everything in silence, approached the small radio in the shelter room. Her fingers found the keys of an electronic keyboard forgotten there, and the music began to flow, the same melody that Laura composed, that Jordan sang, that ran in the blood of the women of that family. The music filled the room, making everyone quiet. It was as if Laura were there, through the small hands of her great niece. "When I first saw Lily at the door of the mansion," Richard said, his voice thick with emotion, "something in her eyes reminded me of Laura. Now I understand why. The same look, the same gift. The piano that fell on Jordan," revealed Clara, "wasn't an accident. Augustus ordered it destroyed precisely when he knew she would be practicing. He wanted to give a warning, to show what happened to those who threatened his precious name." Richard stood up, staggering. Decades of lies weighed on his shoulders. His own father had destroyed so many lives, had taken from him the woman he loved, the chance to have a complete family. "Forgive me," he said, kneeling before Clara and Lily. "Forgive me for not seeing the truth before." At that moment, Mrs. Johnson ran into the room. The police are here. They found documents in Augustus Sterling's office. Evidence about Laura's accident. No! Eleanor screamed. Desperate. You can't do this. The family name... The family name, interrupted Richard, his voice full of determination. Our family is much bigger than my father's lies. Laura knew that. She tried to show us that love and music are stronger than prejudice and pride. Turning to Lily and Clara, he continued, I can't change the past. I can't bring Laura or Jordan back, but I can honor their dream. The Sterling mansion will be transformed into a music school open to everyone. The gift that runs in our family must never be silenced again. Lily, with tears in her eyes, hugged Richard. On the small keyboard, Laura's music continued to sound, no longer a melody of sadness, but a song of hope and new beginnings. 1 year later, the old Sterling mansion was unrecognizable. The once somber walls were now colored with murals of musical notes. Petra's piano occupied a place of honor in the main hall, next to a photo of Laura and Jordan together, smiling at the piano in the back room. Clara recovered, helped coordinate music lessons for underprivileged children. Her life experience and wisdom became as valuable as the sheet music. Eleanor performed community service, teaching basic music theory, a penalty she chose herself. Seeking redemption, Robert turned the story into a book, ensuring that the truth would never again be forgotten or distorted. And Richard finally found peace. Every morning he woke up to the sound of the piano, Lily practicing Laura's compositions, her musical gift blossoming freely, without fear or secrets. The music that was once silenced by greed and prejudice now echoed through the halls of the mansion, carrying the strength of 3 generations of women who, even separated by fate, remained united by the same melody, by the same blood, by the same unconditional love for music. Little Lily, sitting at the piano that once belonged to her great-aunt, was no longer just the girl who knocked on the door asking for bread. She was living proof that some ties are too strong to be broken, some gifts too precious to be silenced, and some stories too important to be forgotten. And every afternoon, as the sun set over Charleston, Laura's music continued to play, now no longer as a lament of the past, but as a promise of the future, a melody of redemption that united people, healed wounds, and proved that in the end, love and truth always find a way to come to light.